got almost all the rail and style boards straight so that they got a good cutting edge. We don't have to use jigs or slides along the side. These are the last boards we have to straighten out, and they're the stiles, the long boards that run up and down the side of each door. And I've got most of the twist out, the bow in the board. There's a substantial bow in it. If I push this end tight, you can see that end way off. And it rocks that much. So we can't put it in against the fence because I'll just follow the contour of the fence. I'll just have a smooth edged bowed board. So I got to have a guide for it. The length of the board runs through solid width of the board against the fence. And this is the piece that touches the fence. Slide this end against the board, and that's how I go through, and when we're finished we'll have one nice straight finished edge to work with. Hopefully. It's all been a bit of a challenge. Now I took that strip off. You can see it's tapers to nothing there up to ½ inch in the center, down to nothing at this side. So, theoretically, now we should have a straight board. Put the uncut side against here. See a big gap in the middle here. Put the slice side against, and it's nice and tight all the way along. Nice straight edge. That's what we'll do to all the rest of the boards like that, and then we've got all the boards squared up and ready to start working with the shaper on. It'll be nice. Nice to get out of doing this. It's been a bit of a long haul. Okay, now that lumber has been milled to size, cut also to the basic pieces that I need. The stiles, the two side stiles, and the rails, top and bottom and center rail. Now I have to groove them to put them together. It's going to be a basic tongue and groove construction, somewhat of a mortise and tenon. So I groove all my stiles one side, and the rails, the inside top and bottom rail, and then the center rail gets grooved on both sides, and that's to accept the center panels that will also fit inside these grooves. Groove looks like 3/4 inch deep, 5/8 inch thick. Lots of meat for the tenon to slip into at the end to hold everything solid. This is going to be the center locking style. That's why I had to groove both sides. And this will be the bottom, the kick style. You may wonder why I put a little piece of tape on the end. I've tried to center this groove, but you never get it absolutely perfect. So I just put a tape so I always know what I run for the top side. So when I slip everything together, I'll have the green tape up so it's all, everything matches as closely as possible, so you got a little bit less sanding later on if you do have any discrepancies in your width. These doors are going to have an arched top panel. So that means the top rail is going to have an arch cut into it. And I've decided on these ones I want a 2-inch lift, so I've got varying widths of doors, but all of them are going to have a 2-inch rise in the center. So that means the size of the arc is going to be different for each door. So unless you're good at trigonometry and you got to figure out the mathematical equation for this, or you want to come back and figure out the theoretical center of the circle, there's a simpler way. What I do is I measure the top rail, the inside, not including the tenons, just the inside of it. This one's 14 inches. So I come back, I've already marked the center of the board. I go back 7 inches on each side of the center line. I mark it there. On this side, mark 7 inches. Okay. Up the center, I want a 2-inch rise, so where I have my center line, I go up top. I mark the 2-inch mark. I take the board, I bring it over, I've got one nail in the bench already, and I take it to my furthest right hand mark. I take another nail, put it on the left hand side. So now that's a 14-inch space between those two nails. And this I just hold it temporarily in place. Will do. And I take my jig. This jig is basically just 2 pieces of wood, the bolt drilled through the center, a wing nut and top to tighten it, and I've got a little sandpaper in between, so when I tighten it down, it holds it steady. So I take this jig, I open it up, lay it against the 2 nails, and bring the center down until it comes to where that 2-inch rise is. I hold my pencil in there, I'll bring the center down to that. Okay, once I get that, I tighten up the wing nut. Now that thing shouldn't move. So now just holding this jig against them 2 nails, I slide it. Slide it to the right, back to the center, slide it to the left. You can do it a couple times to make sure you got a good dark line. Take the jig off, these 2 pieces. There you go. You got your arch. And all I do with this is I'll go over to the bandsaw, I'll cut that out, sand it up a little bit, and now I've got the arch template. I just take that template, hold up onto the top rail, and transfer the mark. Fast and simple. This is probably the first thing on these entire set of doors that has been simple, so I appreciate it. It's going quick here. Okay, I've transferred the arch onto the top rail. I just got to cut it out. I figure if you can sit, you might as well be comfortable. Well, I always sit when I can. When it's roughed out, I'll use the belt sander to clean it up. I cut the groove across the board, you'll see here, before I did this. It's not really necessary because 99% of it comes out when you cut the arch out, but my thought is that if you see there's these little ends, these little tabs that are left later. Now if I try to groove it without having done this previously, there's a lot of stress on that board when I come through here. I think there's a good chance that that little tab will get busted off. So this way it's already been routed through. There's not going to be any stress on it when I run it through the shaper the second time. So it's kind of just preventative maintenance, so I don't end up with a lot of damage and have to rebuild the place or rebuild this thing or re-glue it. Glue a little broken piece on later. So that's why I've done that. Okay, so now I have to cut the groove on the top arched rail. Because it's a free-flowing arch, I can't use a guide on the shaper. I've got a rub collar underneath that I'm going to push up to. This is where it's nice that I started the 2 grooves initially and then cut out the arch, because now I don't have to start at the very end of the board, and that's the most dangerous part of the board. If you catch the end, it goes flipping off. All sorts of bad things can happen. So now I can start back ½ inch, which is a lot safer. I'll use a starting pin for the first little bit, so I got some kind of control on the board just to lever it into the cutter until it hits the rub color and bring it along further. And once I've got a decent amount where now I'm starting to lose control just holding the back, I'll pull it away, remove the starting pin, and then freehand the rest against the rub collar. But all safety devices have been removed from the shaper, so it's kind of a 7,000 RPM spinning machine of death right now. So you really have to have your wits about you when you're working with this thing. See where I started, where there's a nice groove on the end. On the beginning here, that was my starting point. Now I've pushed through with the levering on that starting pin, and I've just pulled out the pin, and I'll have to continue and finish that. All the way through. Got a nice edge to it, and doing it as little as possible without the safeties on there, because that's, I feel, at least by far the most dangerous machine in the shop to be using, especially without any safety features on it. So glad to be done. Okay, now that the stiles and rails are finished on the door, it's time to get to work on the interior panels. They're also going to be Alder. I have rough 1x8 material here. I'll be splitting in half because there's going to be large fluctuations in humidity where these doors are going inside the house. And if I was to leave them 8 inches wide, they'd just bend and twist and make a mess after a while. So I'm splitting the boards in half. I'm going to be trimming them to fit inside the panels. They're going to be tongue and grooved and just going to be free floating. They won't be laminated, because if you laminate a panel that size, I think there's just going to be too much movement and they'll end up cracking. So we just got to get started on splitting these things, straightening out the edges, thickness planing them to the thickness I want, and then we'll come back and run through the shaper and get the profile we need. Okay, I'm finished cutting all the door pieces, just the proper size. I've taken the 3 rails and pressed the center boards into them. They're not glued, they're just free floating, they're just in by pressure. The tenons on all the rails have been applied glue to them, and now I'm just going to press the stiles into each side, and then we should have a finished door. fourth door, 2 more to lay up, and we're done. A little over 70 hours of work, and that's what we got. 6 doors and jambs. The jambs are piled up on the table there. They're going to be assembled at the work site. The 1 door is for a pantry. It's going to have glass in the center, and then the 5 doors all solid alder. It was a bit of a struggle, but it's done. Hopefully he likes them.